Hi, I'm J. Lenora Bressler, and welcome to the February 9, 2022 edition of the Bible, Delight in the Details. We're now starting a multi-session look at Daniel and particularly King Nebuchadnezzar. This is one of the most famous of all ancient kings, not just in the Bible, but also in extra-biblical documentation and archaeology. Indeed, there are very few ancient figures that are better documented and better preserved as far as archaeologically speaking than King Nebuchadnezzar. In this multi-session series, we're going to look at how God interacted with this pagan king. We're going to ask questions, including, did God actually even like King Nebuchadnezzar? You might be surprised at the answer. Today, we want to look at something about Daniel chapter 4. It may surprise you to know that chapter 4 is actually written by King Nebuchadnezzar himself. It is a part of the Old Testament which is not written, like the rest of it, in ancient Hebrew, but rather in a form of the Chaldean language that would later develop into Aramaic, which was the language of Jesus, what he would have been speaking. It's fascinating because in chapter 4 of Daniel, it is Nebuchadnezzar himself who picks up the pen to write about an experience that he had with the living God. He was chastised by God, but in the end, he came out saying that God was to be worshipped. Listen to the final words of chapter 4. These are Nebuchadnezzar's own words, not someone saying this is what Nebuchadnezzar said. These are Nebuchadnezzar's own words written by him. And he says in verse 37, "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right, and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble." Nebuchadnezzar could have added, "and I ought to know," because the previous 36 verses explain exactly how God had humbled him. If I were to ask you, who committed the first sin and what was it? If you say Adam or Eve, wrong. It was actually Lucifer. It was Satan, followed thereafter by a third of the angels in heaven. We now know them as the fallen angels or demons. What was that first sin? It happens to be the sin that is the foundation of every other sin. No, it is not money, nor not even the love of money, which is actually the real translation of that verse that is so often misquoted. It is pride, because pride is at the heart of every other sin. And if left unchecked, it is pride that can actually harden into what is known as the unforgivable sin. We'll look at that in another episode. But for today, I want you to think about how we're going to be looking at King Nebuchadnezzar, and what he struggled with was the most foundational of all sins, pride. Visit me on the next 4 editions of the Bible, Delight in the Details, as we look at how a pagan ancient king's experience can help us in dealing with probably the most difficult of all the sins to keep at bay, pride. I'm J. Lenora Bressler. Visit me on the next edition of the Bible, Delight in the Details. Have a great night.